it was Sunday the 9th of January this year, so 7 months ago or 8 months ago now. I'd had some chest pains, and they'd lasted for a little while, maybe a couple of hours, and I really wasn't taking much notice of them. 2015 and 2016, I'd previously had 2 heart attacks, and those heart attacks had I'd ended up in hospital with stents, but I had no issues with that, perfectly fit after that. Anyway, the pains became apparent that they were turning into that kind of same heart situation, arm pain and the like, and the chest pain got worse and it was hard to breathe. So I rang an ambulance. I said to my wife, I think we should go to the A&E. So with that we did, and then we were told it's half hour before we can get an ambulance to you. So you're better off making your way to the hospital, which is only, thankfully, 2 minutes from where I live in London. My wife drove at great speed, avoiding all red lights, and got me there in about 3 minutes. And as I got into the situation of the A&E, sort of the triage, sitting in a chair, which was, I went straight into the triage room, sat down. The nurse put the cuff on my arm to take my blood pressure, and I died. I was told, my wife told me that they dragged me off the chair, or the nurse dragged me off the chair, and then started immediate CPR. And we're just seeing somebody's put on here, the Queen has just died. So the A&E crash team were called, and the next thing I knew, after they'd done the 52 minutes of defibrillation and CPR, was my coming round, which was like being in a plane crash, is the only way I can describe it. I'd got 13 broken ribs. I had so much pain, and I was thrashing about and flailing around, and they then put me into an induced coma. And I knew no more until I woke up, which was a couple of days later. And during that time of being gone for the 52 minutes where they were doing CPR and the defib, and obviously all the adrenaline shots that they give you in the heart and all that kind of thing, I'd drifted into this lovely world of peace and tranquility, and was kind of immersed in a colour I can't describe, because it's not anything that is part of our spectrum. And it was kind of a mad. The 52 minutes seemed like a long time, like days and days and days of thoughts and feelings and knowledge. A huge amount of knowledge was coming into my mind, and it got to the point where I felt an overpowering feeling of being home, if that makes any sense. Like, it's just like you've gone away. I would imagine it would be if somebody went off to war and they was been around for a couple of years in a war, and they come home, and it's that elation, that feeling of elation of going home. And it felt that way. It also felt that obviously this really intense feeling of love and being wanted and needed, but very calm and peaceful. And so while all this was going on, obviously I'm being crashed about. I didn't know none of that. I didn't see any lights or anything like that. And I didn't have any knowledge of anything that was happening to me in terms of my physical body. But my mind was in a place where I had knowledge I didn't see anybody in the physical, in the sense that, oh, there's Jesus or there's the light or whatever. It was more the sense of knowing that they were there. And it was one of those kind of, I don't know how to describe it really. Oh, it's really an overpowering feeling that that my mum had passed. I knew she was there. I knew my dad was there. I knew my granddad and my parents and all my family before me were all there, and felt that I was safe. It was a nice, safe, soft, loving, magical kind of feeling. It was hard to describe. The only way I could describe it is when you first meet your first girlfriend and you fall in love, and you're kind of like, it's like that sort of feeling. It's like intense kind of need and want. And during the time this was going on, I kind of had, I don't know if it was mind faults or, I wasn't talking to anybody in specific, but I was getting loads of information like why we're here. Why are we here? Why are we on this planet doing this stuff? I'm a charity volunteer and have done charity work now for the last 24 years. And I've also had 12 years of being an elected councillor. So I don't, you have councillors, I take it, in America, but councillors over a sort of one under a senator, if you like, So I did 12 years of that. So, it was all about what have I done here? What have I achieved here? And why am I here? And this came across as being at school, like being at college or university. You're here to learn. That's the feelings that I was getting. It was like you haven't completed any tasks that you said you were going to do. And that also thought was that I'd made this arrangement, this contract, I don't know, the deal you do when you're there to come here and do this thing on this earth, and it's not completed. The feeling of not being complete of what you've supposed to have done. So, if I was supposed to repair a car or whatever, I haven't got to the end of it. It's not running yet. And that I had more to do. And it was also about kind of learning that people are playing a very, very important part. We're all linked. We're all like a chain link fence. We're all connected somehow. And so all the things that we do, if you walk up the road and you turn right, it's got a different connotation to going left. And you see that, you understand that. And I also got to understand that at some stages in my life, I'd obviously offended people. And that offence, although not recognised by me, was recognised, I was seeing that they were offended, the people in the past that I'd offended. And I could see from their point of view how they felt rather than how I felt. I might have said something out of turn and not even thought about it, but they've taken offence. And I got all of this kind of massive flooding information. But it was just like, it seemed like a hell of a long time, days and days of this stuff coming into my mind. Obscure things, like, and you're going to laugh at this because I did. We talk to our pets, don't we? We talk to our dogs and cats, and they respond. When you teach them, they're kind of parrot fashion. Roll over, smile, bark, all that kind of stuff. It was, and the knowledge of having the pets have understanding. You can communicate with a pet. You don't have to talk to a pet. You can communicate by not talking, just by, I don't know, thinking or transferring the thoughts. and they can actually command a conversation. And it doesn't make any sense, does it? It makes absolutely, it's balmy, you know. And one of the things that I said when I was talking after, when I came round a couple of weeks after I came out of it all, was I'm not going to recount this to people because they're going to think I'm off my they're off my head. You know, this is balmy stuff. This is real crazy, you know. And I sort of kind of promised my family, like, you know, I'm not going to talk about this too much. But we had a discussion or two about what I'd gone through. But I still kind of feel that way. I feel even now talking to you, I'm thinking, you think I'm mad, you know. It's just out of, it's not in the same realm of things that we do on an everyday basis. So it's like as though you've had some kind of hallucinogenic drug, you know, it's an inducement of some kind of, I don't know, speed or LSD or something like that. It's surreal, really surreal. But during that time of the 52 minutes that I was gone, which I said, you know, it felt like days, all this information, you know, that you would never normally think about. You wouldn't be in my head. You know, certainly won't be mine. I'm a kind of logical guy. I'm here, I do a job, and when I finish that job, you know, it's over. But the thoughts kept coming back that you haven't finished this job that you're supposed to be doing, this tasking that I've put myself to. I also got to understand this, that we choose when we're born, we choose how we exist, we choose when we die, and we choose how we die. We choose that. That's in my head. That's the thoughts that I was having. That's the sort of crazy bits, really. And we won't go until we've actually completed all of the things that we said we were going to do. So at that point, I mean, there was a lot of after thoughts after I came out. So when they brought me out of the resuscitated me, at that point when I was flailing about, I was more interested in this plane crash situation than what I'd been through, because I'd gone from what seemed like 4 or 5 days into what felt like a nanosecond of time of nothing. Like I was just sitting in the chair a minute ago. What am I doing here? What am I doing? You know, why are all these ribs broken? I've got 13 broken ribs. You know, I've been on this machine they call a Lucas machine. I've been smashed about and, you know, having ribs broken by doctors and nurses. I've had shocks. I've got burns. I've got all this sort of stuff going on in my life. I'm thinking, well, how did this occur? I was just sitting in the chair a minute ago, and now this sort of, you know, second in time, even though I've got all these thoughts about this stuff, the time's gone past in a split second of nothing. And so then became obviously the recovery, and they put me into an induced coma, which I was in for about, I think, 2, maybe 3 days. I can't remember exactly now. Memory's shot in that sense. There's still lots of bits and pieces that come to mind for no reason. But when I came out of the coma, it was horrific. And then when the time that I was in hospital, because it's during the time of the pandemic, height of the pandemic, or the last height of the pandemic, the second part of the pandemic, I wasn't allowed visitors in the hospital. So I was pretty much alone. No family visitors were allowed in the UK. So I was pretty much alone, except for the nurses that were looking after me in the intensive care unit. And I was shot. You know, my kidneys had failed, my liver had failed, it all gone, and I wasn't really on a good side of living in any situation. So it wasn't until I think the 3rd week of intensive care, a high dependency unit, I'd had dialysis, and the kidneys had started to return and the liver was starting to work again. Because it was all shot, it was all gone, it was all failed. And I was having dialysis and blood transfusions. My blood had turned acidic and was starting to thicken, I gather. I got to speak on the phone, on the mobile phone, which I could barely hold at that point because I was too weak. But I had a nurse help me, and it got to the point where I understood that my family were told the chances of my survival were pretty much low, because I'd been around without oxygen, having the CPR for that amount of time. I was likely to suffer from what they call a anoxic brain injury. So lack of oxygen to the brain would have made me a kind of a vegetative state. And they told my family, you don't expect any real change. Chances are I'd probably be in a pretty bad condition, not been able to move or talk or do anything like that. But when I did come round, I got this, I suppose it was the doctors asking me my name. They said to me, "What's your name? Do you know where you are? Do you know why you're here? Can you move your arms? Can you move your legs? Can you blink? Can you move your fingers?" And I could do all of that. So I remember one doctor looking at the other doctor saying, "This guy's got 9 lives, he shouldn't be doing any of this." And at that point, they told my family, he's actually back and he shouldn't be. And then I became an interest in the hospital to people about what had previously occurred. Doctors and nurses were coming into my room and asking me, when you were gone, what happened? And then I started to remember these things again and recounting these things again, and to the point where at one point they said, "Well, you're a medical mystery, really, because you shouldn't be here. You should never have survived that kind of length of time without any oxygen." Because my heart just quivered. It didn't do any beating in that 52 minutes until about the 51st minute, I suppose. And so just being alive for them was like, wow, you know what I mean? And then they started asking the questions, because obviously they've seen it before. I was asking, "What happened, Paul? Did you see anything?" They always say, I start with that, "Did you see anything?" Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I did, but you're not going to believe it, because I still can't believe it. I still can't get my head around any of it. And it kind of, all the bits and pieces came back about the colours and the intensity of the love and the thoughts of your family being there looking out for you, and understanding that we're not alone ever. We're never alone. It's like when you die, you just move like from one chair to another, but you're in a different time and a different dimension. Time has no meaning when you're dead. No meaning at all. As I said, it's like the feeling that we humans created time, that time has no relevance to death. And so being dead for a minute or 52 minutes makes no difference. It's a nothing. That is that nanosecond, even though the feeling is that it's a long time. It's not. And our life isn't that way either. Our life isn't very long. And what we do in that life is important. That it's timely, that we do it. When we do it in the right way. And my understanding of it was that everything has a time and a place on this planet to do what you have to do before you can go back to that dimension that you were previously in. And that's where we all started from. we're not here. We're born here, of this earth, of our mothers, but we started there. This is just the meat suit that we've chosen. It sounds crazy, but that's what it is. We're a meat suit. I'm not even sure now, to this day, I sometimes feel that I'm not quite back. You know, that might sound a bit strange as well, but I sometimes think, am I being operated by my spirit, soul, whatever, on a kind of remote basis? Is this just a method of transportation, a method of doing things? But I'm not. I feel like there's still something back there that hasn't quite come back here. Does that make any sense? Loads and loads of afterthoughts. Once I was out of the hospital, I was in there for about 3 weeks in intensive care, and they let me home very disabled by whatever was, the crushing ribs, a chest full of Lego bricks all moving about inside. And then just the kind of reoccurring thoughts of things that I would never have thought of before, like the dogs and cats and the pets thing and all that. So it was quite intense and quite in a sense memorable, that it was in a good way. It wasn't a bad way. There wasn't, I gained the knowledge there isn't a hell. There's no place. You're not going to be punished, and that we are all part of the same existence. We're all, if you want to call it God, a deity, I don't know really what you would want to, how you want to book it, but we are all as good as each other. We are all similar souls, all part of this one unity, one thing, and we've all got a place to be and a part to play, and we do, and when we've done, we leg it back, and then carry on in our original world of spirit, soul, being, as I said, which is just crossing the road from one place, or moving a chair from one room in a room to another chair in another room, or something of that nature. It's not far away, and they're not far away. That was the main thing, is knowing that I'm sitting here talking to you now, Jeff, but I feel that my family are surrounding me. They are here. They can be 2 or 3 or 5. They could be 10, but they've all got the ability to be here. And you have the ability as well, when you're gone to the afterlife, to make contact with, not necessarily in terms of ghosts and spooky things and stuff like that, but you can do it by making that person aware that you're there. They not necessarily get it at that point in time, but they will eventually understand that, oh, I reckon that must have been me uncle or me auntie, or some loved one making a kind of contact. It could be the craziest things. I'm convinced my every time I see a squirrel now, we have a lot of grey squirrels in England. Every time I see a squirrel, I'm convinced now that that's my mum recognising or telling me that she's here and she's about. And she had no link to anything, any animals in that sense, but that's the way I feel about it. That's the way, I see a squirrel in the morning running across the front. I've had them actually sitting on the gate, never seen it before. And now I have squirrels sitting on the gate of my house looking at me. I could be sitting on a little bench outside my house, and there'd be a squirrel sitting there just looking at me, and you think, I say good morning. It's crazy. I know it's crazy, but I say good morning to a squirrel. It's madness. I think they're going to put me away one day. So, I mean, that in a succinct way, I suppose, is what occurred. Like I say, you're here to learn. You're here to learn. Why you're here, what reason I'm back, I don't know. People say, "Oh, you must have done some really good things for people, and therefore, you've been given that second chance, if you want." But I don't know. I don't really know. It doesn't seem to be. You don't know the purpose. You only know that you have to complete it, whatever it is. I have to complete it, and if that's but I have learned that you should always do as much good as you possibly can. I've always been a Christian man, although I was, before I had the near-death experience, you could call it. I always wondered if, we would meet our Christian brethren, whether I'd see Christ and whether I'd see God, but I didn't see any of the light stuff that people talk about. And I didn't know any of that, really, until I started looking into it. So like a couple of months ago, when I got involved in, the sort of Facebook NDE stuff and other people's accounts of it, and then go, "Oh, yeah, do you know what? I remember that." And sometimes they can trigger little memories that you didn't have at that time. Where did that come from? That I've remembered it, and it sort of goes on. But yeah, so we're here in this big library of font of knowledge that I don't know what for, and I don't know why I'm here. All I know is that I'm blessed enough to be alive and with my family for another number of years. I've got 93 in my head for some reason. So whether that's going to be the time. I was told yesterday what caused the problem, which I didn't know. It was just, it was an unknown electrical fault somewhere. I didn't even know that your difference between your heart has got electrical side of it and a plumbing side of it. So you've got electricians, you've got plumbers in cardiology, people that deal with specifics. And I learned yesterday it was a blood clot because I'd had cancer only 3 months before my cardiac arrest. I suffered from bowel cancer and had that successfully removed. It hadn't reached metastasis stage, and they just took a lump out and just joined it together. And I'd recovered quite well from that, as I have with this. I shouldn't really have recovered that quickly with that, but I did. But it was probably a leftover blood clot from a lack of blood thinners, I suspect. And I put that down to me. But, so here I am, recounting all this past experience and looking forward to a longer life now, because they've told me that the chances of it happening again is pretty remote. So, it's not so scary now. It was scary, but it's not. So, but I'm not frightened of dying, that's for sure, because it's that was good. That was a really good experience, as opposed to plane crash situation coming out of it. So yeah, that's it really.